G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome back for some more Skyforge. In this video I'm going to be explaining and showing in detail the character progression system in the game, that is, gearing, the skill tree, the Final Fantasy X style sphere grid, and the prestige system as well, which is kind of this game's version of gear score or levels, like a combined level and gear score system. So, let's start there, because that's an interesting point to start with. This game has no levels. There's no, get to level 90 and then you start endgame, or there's no max out at level 20 in Destiny or anything like that. We're looking at a prestige system, which is a calculation of your gearing level for your general gearing, which is things like your rings and your gearing slot upgrades, your actual weapons for that class, so that's more class specific, and then your actual progression on the Ascension Atlas as well. So all of those things that contribute to the power of your character are given this prestige score and go towards calculating this, your total prestige. Now, there's no where does endgame start specifically, once you reach level 80 then you can start doing, specific endgame thing. It's a little bit more organic and fluid from what I've discovered so far. However, there are things that restrict what you can do by prestige, like there are certain missions before you can continue where it's this is recommended for people with 2k prestige. And now, it's a bit of an arbitrary distinction sometimes, because some items might have higher prestige ratings, they might contribute more prestige, but maybe the stats aren't as useful for your particular class, so you can kind of artificially boost your prestige score a little bit without really being much more powerful. But for the most part, it seems like a pretty decent representation of your general power. Jumped into some PvP, and guys with 500 extra prestige were just absolutely wrecking me. So I think it does do a decent job of sort of conveying the relative power level of characters. Obviously, I've only been playing for 10 to 12 hours at this point, so it's a bit hard to tell exactly how well prestige rates at endgame and how far it extends and what the sort of prestige grind is and things like that. But this is just an early look at some of the progression systems, and I think it's important to know that sort of distinction between this not being a level-based game and instead having this sort of gear score style prestige system. So, let's take a look at gearing. Gearing looks pretty simple on the surface, and it is pretty simple. I'm not gonna lie. It doesn't feature, multiple armor slots. You don't find gloves. You don't find magical boots. You don't find magical pants. You don't find magical underwear. All of your armor is essentially cosmetic in this game. So if we go to the style room, all of this stuff here is cosmetic. You can literally run around in a bikini if you want, and I've watched Pox streaming the past few days, and that's precisely what he's been doing. If you want to sort of protest the fact that gear doesn't actually mean anything in this game, you can run around in a bikini if you desire. But otherwise, all of this armor stuff is purely cosmetic. Now, this is going to be the monetization for the game, obviously. It's going to be a free-to-play game. They've said the cash store is going to be primarily cosmetic, and I can assume that pretty much all of your costume stuff is going to be obtained through that. Now, in the first 10 to 12 hours, I've only received 2 costumes, and I was able to unlock different class costumes. So this is the Paladin costume that I can now use on my Gunner class because I unlocked it in the training module. Otherwise, though, you unlock something like, I don't know, I unlocked this stupid holiday costume, and one of the first costumes you unlock is the bikini, guys. It is. So, I don't know what to think about that, really. But yeah, the armor is completely cosmetic, and it's mostly going to be obtained through the cash store, or if I do actually go into here, I'm sort of remembering now, you can actually buy some costumes on the market using specific currencies that you can obtain through various missions. Like, there are some PvP tournaments that award celestial threads that you can buy things with. So you'll be able to grind for some costumes in-game, but I think most of them are going to be paid for cosmetics. So, not really a big deal, but if character look and customization in look is an important part for you, and I think for a lot of RPG players it is, really, where you find a cool new item, you find an awesome new helmet, and it looks sick on your character. If that's a big appealing point for you, then that's really not gonna sort of be a positive point in Skyforge for you, because most of that stuff is going to be, paid for cosmetics or obtained kind of separately to actual power enhancing gear. On the same token, when you obtain weapons, I haven't really seen the model for my weapon change, and if it changed very minorly out of the 10 to 15 weapon upgrades I've gotten so far. So mostly the cosmetics, I think, for the weapons are also probably going to be microtransactions. Now, in terms of the actual in-game progression and gearing, you have kind of like three areas of slots. You have your weapon slot, which is your primary weapon. This influences your damage. It adds might, which is one of the primary damage stats. So you can see over here, might increases your base damage. There are a lot of different things like this. For example, strength increases the minimum base damage, whereas this is your just general base damage. There's also a maximum damage. There's like bonus damage from valor. So there's lots of different types of damage stats you can get, but your weapon as a core influences your average damage. Now, you can also get secondary modifiers on this, and I've seen a few different ones of these. Some of these are pretty nice, like this one here on the weapon now. Killing an enemy will increase the damage of the next fire blast or plasma beam. I really like this because when you're in plasma mode, you can keep chaining kills with the plasma beam. So that's a pretty interesting. It had an actual interesting impact on my gameplay. So for the most part, though, these drop from enemies, or these drop from bosses. You get little boxes from bosses that sometimes will hand these out, or you sometimes get them from questing. So they seem to just sort of drop throughout the regular course of gameplay. The secondary slot here, which is kind of like the shield slot, if you're playing the paladin, it actually is a shield. But as like the gunner, for example, it's the cartridge for your weapon. This is a defensive slot. I don't know why a cartridge is defensive, don't ask me, I don't know. But this gives you stamina, which is your primary defensive stat that gives you health. Now you can get some other interesting modifiers on here as well. My barrier skill, once I unlocked it, I don't actually have that skill yet. I got this weapon before I unlocked it. Increases more damage. So there's some interesting different things you can change around there. And then you have rings. Now these things, the weapons, are obviously class specific. If I switch to the berserker, I instead, I have sword. I have sword and shield for the paladin. Lightbind has his own rod and pommel setup going, but these are class specific. However, rings, you can see I share them across all my classes. Now, rings provide a mixture of different stats. You can basically build your stats any way you want on your character with these different rings. So if I think I've actually disassembled all my rings, but I've got Valor, Spirit, I've got Luck and Spirit, I've got Strength and Valor, I've got Luck and Spirit. I've got a good mixture of different stats there, and you can get any of those primary stats. You can also get tertiary stats as well. So these stats down here, there's actually a big range of these different stats that do some pretty interesting different things. And you can get a lot of those through rings as well. That sort of starts to happen about maybe the 5 to 8 hour mark in game. You start getting rings that have some of these extra things. So, this ring gives me more mobility. This ring gives me more mobility and health. This ring gives me an increase in maximum total damage. The high-end damage that I can inflict, as well as an increase in temper. And temper, chance that the ability will inflict the maximum additional damage regardless of the target's health. So that, those sort of things go pretty well together, temper and maximum damage, right? So, and then there's critical chance, discharge recovery. So you have a fair bit of customization of your character based on these rings, and I guess the idea is that the rings were supposed to sort of replace armor, but if you look at like a typical RPG, you have things like 2 rings, an amulet slot, and then you have each armor slot. Now, sort of to play devil's advocate here and to maybe play hopefully for the future of this game, maybe in the late game, this becomes a very significant and interesting decision, because when you start to add more gear slots, what happens to an RPG is that each of those gear slots has to be weaker and less important in detail. Let's say you have a regular sort of RPG that has gloves. Now let's say I break the glove slots in half and you start finding left and right gloves. Well, to sort of keep the same power level of character, you need to start having left and right gloves being half the strength of, a pair of gloves. And that makes sense, obviously. What if you start breaking them down into, like, components of the armor? You start to get less and less interesting decisions, and, selecting each of the fingers on your glove gives less impact to your overall character. I guess the idea of removing a bunch of slots and instead just having 4 rings for this sort of customization means that at endgame, maybe, hopefully, these rings end up being very interesting decisions. You have to very carefully decide the bonus stats you're getting and the extra tertiary stats you're getting, and you can create some interesting builds out of that. That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping. Now, there's another form of progression on this tree as well. We have the upgrade slots, so the weapon upgrade, the additional upgrade, the ritual ornament upgrade. Now, you upgrade these by spending cash, other currencies, and most importantly, these enhancement stones. These enhancement stones are gained from salvaging other pieces of gear, so you can right click and then press disassemble and you'll gain some of these. You can also buy them on the market if you have some extra cash lying around, and then you can upgrade these slots. Now this seems like a very non-engaging part of the character progression. It's just kind of like something extra you do just to boost stats. I mean, I'm talking if you upgrade this, I gain 9 extra might, and that's basically what happens each time I upgrade it. Like, it's really, there's nothing else interesting there, there's no decisions to be made, it's literally just press an upgrade button to spend some of your enhancement stones and to spend some of your credits. So it's just a way to boost the raw power of your characters, and this is across all of the characters as well. So you can see rank 2 weapon. If I go here, I'm still rank 2 weapon. So that's across all the characters as well. It's kind of like general slot upgrade. So this one, for example, is, you know, a mixture of stats as well. I mean, the stats that you get when you upgrade, like if I press upgrade here, they actually change each time. So now I'm getting a bunch of spirit on the next upgrade. That's pretty tempting. I think I'll go ahead and spend some particles of mastery on upgrading that. That's, you know, there's no actual decisions there though. You just keep pressing the upgrade button and getting stronger. So I wish they had made this more interesting. Maybe you had, like, you know, option A or option B, and they give different stats, and that allows the characters at endgame to, you know, end up being a little bit different. Maybe you invested in a lot of DPS upgrades as you're going. Maybe you invested in a lot of defense, and that would be an interesting extra engaging point. So that's kind of boring. Just an extra progression system. Now there is a cooldown thing here. Any sort of like timed cooldown stuff in MMOs is like, oh my god, this is going to be pay to win. But you just pay it with normal credits. Like, it's really insignificant. I don't really see the point of why that's even there, honestly. So that's the gearing system. The potential is there for it to become more interesting later on. Early on, it's pretty basic, and it looks pretty basic. The other side is this awesome looking Ascension Atlas. If you're a fan of Path of Exile or Final Fantasy X, then you're going to love this because it's a sphere grid system. However, unfortunately, it's a very, very linear sphere grid system. There's no real decisions to be made right until the end game. So you can see this is all the path I've traveled here. Now the general idea is that you gain Sparks of Destruction, Sparks of Creation, Sparks of Balance, and Sparks of Progress. Now this is class specific. These 3 can be spent on any classes, and the trees are separate for each class. So if I zoom out here, you can see that each of the Ascension Atlas trees are different for each class. So if you want to invest in one class, then you're going to spend these guys, and you're going to have less to spend on the other classes. However, this is unlimited. You can grind these, you know, basically as long as you want, and the idea is that eventually you could potentially get every single sphere grid node in every single class if you want to. So there's the potential of maxing out all classes. So if you like that sort of thing, then that is there for you. Now, you'll see, if I move to a spot I haven't spent yet, you'll see red, blue, and green. The red ones typically take Sparks of Destruction, though this one is a specific node that takes the class progress point, so I actually have to play this class to be able to progress into it for this next ability, so that's a bit of a bottleneck there. Otherwise, you spend, you know, the greens and the blues to progress through, and you unlock raw stats, so this is stamina and proficiency. Just to go back a second, proficiency is allows you to equip higher level gear, so for example, I had a ring, this has a proficiency rating of 174, so you need 174 to be able to equip this. I have 800, easy mode, but you get those from those stamina nodes. That's where I haven't seen any other ways of obtaining proficiency apart from progressing in that class. Otherwise, I think it might be across different classes as well. Actually, we can potentially even check that out just here. So this one here has there's a proficiency of 603. I think this is my highest one just here. It looks like when I change classes, my proficiency doesn't change. So I think proficiency is shared across all classes. So if you progress a lot in the gunner, you don't have to worry about not being able to equip a ring that has a higher proficiency on your light binder, for example. So to go back to the tree, you progress through this thing, and it's extremely linear for the majority of the game. Now, let's see, if we zoom forwards a heap, we start to eventually as I said, I'm about 12 hours in, and this is how far I am through the tree at the moment. Maybe in a couple more hours of gameplay, I'll start to get some decisions. Now, here the decision is basically to get some extra stamina and bonus luck, which increases crit. So it's not a really very engaging decision. Like, I feel like you're mostly gonna ignore that and go for the skills instead, because skills are much more exciting. And then there's some extra decisions like leadership, which this is kind of a like an extra mini game where you get to send little followers on missions and stuff. And I think leadership sort of influences that, so you can invest into that if you want to gain some leadership to sort of boost that side of things. So very linear as we go along here. You know, there's more leadership there. However, once you get to the end game, then it starts to branch out a lot. You can see there's actual 3 major branches out in this way, and these each have different skills associated with them. I think this one here, like if we look at this, the theme is mostly damage dealing, like this is a flamethrower one. This one here seems to be a support-oriented one. This one seems to be a bit more defensive. So you get some more options about how you want to build your character. Now, you can eventually get all of these different things, you know, by grinding enough points to, you know, essentially invest in all of them, but you do have to sort of make make the decisions about how you go ahead doing that. So that's interesting that it starts to branch out. I really wish it branched out earlier and it was more complex earlier on in the game, but, you know, I'm a bit spoiled by Path of Exile, right, when it comes to character building complexity, which that game is, like, insane right from the start. So, you know, some of these are a little bit more interesting, like I can pick which route I want to go through. If I want to just bypass this entire thing, I can here. I like that. I feel like a lot more should have the design of this. You know, I can get this skill, or if I'm not interested in that skill, I can bypass it. That's a really good design. I wish that was in more of the tree. But, you know, it's still a cool system. It's a cool themed system. There's something satisfying about, you know, spending that point and having that little line go across and then a little bling as it fills up the node. It's a pretty satisfying form of character progression. So, guys, I think that just about covers it. There are a few other sort of extra external bits of progression, like, as I said, the follower system and things like that, but that's the primary character progression. You know, it's reasonably satisfying. There seems to be potential for it to get more complex and interesting. Early on, you know, like most MMOs, it starts off pretty simple and slowly starts to build up in complexity. So if I manage to get further in this beta, I'll give you guys, you know, a heads up on whether it becomes a lot better. But otherwise, if you have any questions about the progression system, feel free to ask in the comments below, or if you want to see any other sort of Skyforge videos, let me know. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.